Hello everyone and welcome to ThinkTV. Today we will be talking about top 10 experiments gone wrong. We'll be showcasing some of the most bizarre and hilarious experiments ever conducted by scientists. As you know, science is all about experimentation and discovery, but sometimes things can go awry. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to laugh your pants off. The invisible fence experiment. In the 1990s, a group of scientists wanted to test the effectiveness of invisible fences for keeping animals in their designated areas. They decided to use a group of monkeys as their test subjects. The experiment was going well until one of the monkeys figured out that if he walked backwards through the invisible fence, he could go wherever he wanted. Soon, all the monkeys caught on, and the experiment was deemed a failure. The smell experiment. In the early 2000s, a group of scientists wanted to test the effects of different smells on human behavior. They decided to use a group of college students as their test subjects. The students were blindfolded and asked to smell various scents, such as roses, lavender, and gasoline. However, things took a turn for the worse when one of the students accidentally knocked over a bottle of skunk scent. The entire room smelled like skunk for weeks, and the experiment was quickly shut down. The teleportation experiment. In the 1980s, a group of scientists claimed they had discovered a way to teleport objects from one location to another. They decided to test their theory by teleporting a live mouse from one side of the room to the other. However, when they activated the teleportation device, the mouse turned inside out and exploded. Needless to say, the experiment was not a success. The super strength experiment. In the 1990s, a group of scientists wanted to create a serum that would give humans super strength. They decided to test the serum on a group of volunteers. However, things took a turn for the worse when one of the volunteers accidentally punched through a wall and got stuck. The experiment was quickly shut down, and the volunteers were left to deal with their newfound strength on their own. The time travel experiment. In the early 2000s, a group of scientists claimed they had discovered a way to travel through time. They decided to test their theory by sending a group of volunteers back to the 1800s. However, when the volunteers arrived in the past, they were immediately mistaken for witches and burned at the stake. Needless to say, the experiment was not a success. The invisibility experiment. In the 1950s, a group of scientists wanted to create an invisibility serum that would allow soldiers to sneak up on enemy forces. They decided to test the serum on a group of volunteers. However, when they activated the serum, the volunteers turned invisible but also lost their ability to speak. The experiment was quickly shut down, and the volunteers were left to wander around the lab, invisible and mute. The flying experiment. In the 1970s, a group of scientists wanted to test the effects of weightlessness on the human body. They decided to do this by strapping a group of volunteers to a giant slingshot and launching them into the air. However, when they launched the volunteers, the slingshot broke, and the volunteers were launched into outer space. Needless to say, the experiment was not a success. The mind control experiment. In the 1990s, a group of scientists wanted to create a device that would allow them to control the minds of their test subjects. They decided to test the device on a group of volunteers. However, when they activated the device, it turned out to be a malfunctioning TV remote control. The volunteers just stared at the TV, unable to move or speak. The scientists quickly realized their mistake and shut down the experiment. The gravity experiment. In the 2000s, a group of scientists wanted to test the effects of gravity on different objects. They decided to use a bowling ball and a feather as their test subjects. However, when they dropped the bowling ball and the feather at the same time, the bowling ball hit the ground with a loud thud, while the feather floated away into the wind. It turned out that they had forgotten to account for air resistance. The experiment was deemed a failure, and the scientists were left with a bowling ball-sized dent in the floor. The cloning experiment. In the late 1990s, a group of scientists wanted to clone a human being. They decided to use a volunteer as their test subject. However, when they activated the cloning machine, it turned out to be a malfunctioning photocopier. The volunteer was left with multiple copies of himself, but they were all two-dimensional and useless. The experiment was deemed a failure, and the volunteer was left to explain to his family why there were multiple copies of him lying around the lab. Conclusion. Well, there you have it, folks. The top 10 experiments gone wrong. Science can be unpredictable, and sometimes, things don't go according to plan. But even when experiments fail, they can still teach us valuable lessons and make us laugh. So, keep experimenting, and who knows, maybe your next failure will make it onto our list. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to ThinkTV.